Thank you so much, Jenna, for introducing me today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is good to be back, I must say, after 7 years in Canada. My name is Christian Pearson, and I am here to talk to you tonight after such a long travel, honestly. 14,500 kilometers, actually. So the reason I'm actually standing here today is because of the same topic I'm going to talk about. Online connection. You can see this shot behind me, actually. I want to tell you a little story. I went for a walk for the first time in Canberra since I was here, when I was actually born in Canberra. And now I'm re-experiencing it as an adult. But having seen it with fresh eyes from being in Canada so long, suddenly I'm really taken aback by just like the amber beauty of the place. So maybe to you, this is just another scene in Canberra. But to me, this is what I wish winter was like. Winter where you can go outside and not die instantly. This is very different from where I was in 2017. Here, the weather was minus 25 Celsius. My car again wouldn't start, and I was going to be late for work. So I traveled my way uselessly after maybe 30 minutes, because actually as soon as you go out the door, it was like this high, the snow. And yeah, so I had no choice actually that day but to run 2 kilometers through the snow to work. The thing about that was, the worst part wasn't almost falling through a snowbank into a ditch and trying to get around the highway to get to there. No, the worst part was going to a job I hated. It was a team that wasn't supportive, it was endless overtime, and worst of all, it was not feeling like I was doing anything that mattered at the time. Now, something about me is I am someone who really cares about impact, as you all do too. And the problem for me was that the workplace I was at didn't share my values. So that day was the day I decided to make a change. I went and tried all kinds of things, and then one day I encountered effective altruism. And finally, I had a framework to think about problems in the world that I actually care about. How to solve big problems with your career or your studies. And the most powerful thing about effective altruism is the fact that you can talk to any EA anywhere in the world, and they share the same values as you. Maybe you and I disagree on exactly how to go and implement change. Maybe we disagree on like the cause we're interested in, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're all here at EA Canberra because you want to make a positive difference in the world. So perhaps you have a EA project in mind. You want to take some kind of action to do something. Maybe it's a field of study if you're a student, maybe it's a job you have in mind, or maybe it's a project. Maybe it's a project you're still thinking about, maybe it's one you're working on already. So if you are anything like me, trying to do something, you probably encounter the fact that it's hard to do it alone. You need a team. You need someone who supports you. And I didn't have that back at Exova. But here tonight, maybe you don't have the skills or the resources, so you take it to your local EA group. And you say, hey everyone, here's my idea. What if we do X? And sometimes you might encounter the problem that no one else has your skills, no one else has quite the same vision as you. And you think, oh man, if only I could find someone who got it, who had exactly the same project in mind as I did. And that's the thing, because EA Canberra, as amazing as we are here, it is one part of the EA community. The rest of the EA community is huge and global. So you are not alone, actually. There are other people like you in the world who might have the same ideas. And the problem you've encountered here is actually that your collaborator, your ideal collaborator, might not be local to you. But great, how do you find them? If you find them, how do you build trust? And how is it possible to work remotely with people across the world? That's what we'll be covering today. So we're going to tell you a little bit about my story, where I came from, a bit more, and we're going to look at the 4 keys to remote collaboration, things I've picked up through doing a bunch of different projects remotely, online. We're going to do a group activity facilitated by Jenna, which will be really fun, and a Q&A session at the end. Okay, let's get into it. So the thing you got to understand about moving across the world is that you will have a split life. Never again will you know everyone in the same place. Never again will your friends and family all be in the same room. That is fundamentally why I care about online collaboration and online connection, because you have to communicate online in order to stay sane. All right. So one thing I believe is that the more people you know, the better, the more opportunities you have. And in my case, I had an old friend who I still kept in contact with thanks to online collaboration, who introduced me to my ideal collaborator. In this case, who is in the audience right now, Jenna. Jenna and I met and immediately clicked because we had the same values, thanks to EA, but also we had the same kind of team environment and personality, and we founded a project called Insights for Impact, which is a YouTube channel that attempts to communicate effective altruism-aligned research in the form of documentary-style, short but entertaining videos. We just actually released a new one, What to Eat in the Global Catastrophe, where we reached out to the organization called AllFed, you may have heard of them, the Alliance to Feed the Earth in Disasters, and 20 minutes of just awesome stuff. I recommend you check it out, but basically food security no matter what. So that was the culmination of my journey, but I wouldn't say that any of this right now would have been possible if I hadn't had a few more experiences before that. I had done a little bit of work online with my friend Jimmy in Australia, even while in Canada, and I'm also on the board of directors for a charity called Clearitin, which operates out of Canada and services Bangladesh and Madagascar. In their case, they do poverty alleviation and infrastructure and teaching. So it was those experiences that really made me learn a few things. There are 4 areas that I consider important in this case: finding projects, building trust, the dreaded time zones, of course, and accountability. Right, I will say that finding projects is probably the first step if you're at this point. Now, what goes into that? Personal branding is important. One thing I like about EA in general is that everyone likes Google Sheets and Forms, so everyone's really tech savvy already. But if you don't have a personal website, I really recommend you get one. You may have noticed every time you apply to an effective altruism conference, they're always like, send us your LinkedIn. Well, if you send your personal website as well, you're probably more likely to get in as well. And it's just the best thing ever when you're networking and you're reaching out to someone you just met and you're like, what do you do? Oh, here's what I do. In addition to that, if you're looking for something to do and maybe you haven't got an idea yet, check out Airtable. It's full of all kinds of volunteering opportunities. There's everything there from volunteer work. I think some of it's paid, but not necessarily. Mostly volunteer. Obviously, the EA Forum, good place. Not just long, deep dive essays and things like that, but also a great place to get opportunities. EA Hub is there too. I think it's defunct now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's no one really uses it these days. That being said, I actually did get some random cold contacts from there, so recommend that too. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Okay. So in addition to that, your network. I've always hated the term networking. I don't know about you. When I was in school, it's like, what even does that mean? Well, it's literally just, hello person, here's what I propose. You have something that could help me. We could help each other. That's all it is. And the more people you know, as I said earlier, the better, because serendipity. The best thing about knowing lots of people is that you randomly can connect people who can help each other. Now, Slack, good too. So yeah, there's a bunch of EA Slack channels there. I've mentioned them there. Thanks for the invite to EA Australia, by the way. It's nice to be back. Yep, so now that you've found a project, hopefully, building trust. That's even more important, honestly. So yeah, the previous position I had that I hated, there wasn't really a sense of like support. Whereas now, with doing stuff that I kind of choose and have more freedom in, I really recommend it because building trust is a lot easier. The first thing though is, if you're online, always have a video call. I can't stress this enough. Like, if you encounter someone, you're like, you seem cool. Do you want to like get on a call and talk about the idea? And they're like, oh, no, sorry. I only do text chat. I won't recommend working with them. I did know someone who was exactly the same, and I thought, oh, that's okay. They're just shy. They're actually a catfish. That did happen. They were lying about many things. Don't recommend it. So always have a video call. Secondly, how do you schedule your video call? Well, Calendly. If you've used it, you probably know it's great. Again, if you're making that cold email to someone, or your cold LinkedIn connection, or your cold Facebook message, always comes up, how do you schedule your call? Well, Calendly solves that problem because you can put your schedule in there, and they choose the time that works for them in their time zone. Brilliant, huh? Another thing is start small, because maybe you're like, oh, this project, it would be so great, but there's no way I can quit my job for this. Well, yeah, you don't have to. You can just start small. You can do one single video in our case. And if that works, great. That's part of setting clear expectations as well. You want everyone to know what they're getting into when you start. And in that way, I would just quickly aside, contracts are good. If you're dealing with grants and stuff like that, if you're dealing with actual financial incentive, contracts are just amazing. It's just a way to agree on what everyone agrees upon. So they're not scary. Everyone should have them. 3, time zones. You probably all know already, but timeanddate.com has a feature that lets you compare across different time zones. You can add a city, like Edmonton in my case, and then Canberra in this case, and I think that's the one that has the little smiley faces if everyone's time zones work for them. So you scroll the slider along, and yeah, unfortunately London you lose, but sucks to be you, I guess. And then Calendly again solves that problem as well. And there was another thing I picked up from trying all the stuff that I've been talking about. Asynchronous working. One thing that happens is if you're working on a video project in our case, there's a lot of like upkeep and straightforward-ish tasks that take a long time. One person can do the video editing while the other person sleeps, and the other person can do the scripting while that person's sleeping. Brilliant. So that's an unexpected advantage of working remotely. But again, I wouldn't say that working remotely is better or worse. It's just that it's just as possible. Finally, accountability. Now, this is the one I struggle with. I'm very good at building relationships with people, I guess. But I'm not good at getting people to do what they say they'll do. I don't know. There's some personality types that are just like, no, you're out if you don't do this, but I'm not like kind of that. How do you get around that, though? Well, routines. So setting up a routine of work. So time blocking, that's really good. Hey, did you do the thing you did today? No. Oh, what were you doing then? Oh. Then that comes into, actually it's the bottom of the list, I should be at the top. Clockify and toggle. Recommend always logging anything you do. Log your time. So think of yourself as a freelancer. You wouldn't go to a company and do work for them, and they're like, how much did you work? And you're like, oh, I guess I didn't log my hours. I guess I won't get paid. No. Log your hours. Secondly, external accountability. I actually have one 6 months ago. Jeroen Willems, you may have heard of him. He runs the YouTube channel A Happier World. He and I, every week, we get on our call and we're like, what are you going to do this week, Christian? What are you going to do this week, Jeroen? And then the next week, did you do that? Yes or no? And that little bit of external motivation, that really helps. Especially if you're doing your project full time and you've quit your job. Because if you struggle with executive functioning, like many people do, unfortunately, without that external accountability of a paycheck or a fire under your ass, you really want that structure. And you need to create it yourself if you're doing your own thing, unfortunately. Now, another thing on that, 24/7 online co-working in GatherTown. Have you all been to an online conference before? So I'm seeing some nods there. Well, GatherTown explodes with activity. There's like hundreds of people there. But yeah, normally it's a place you can just log into. It's a website, and you can walk around and get like these impromptu Zoom calls where you just walk past people and jump into the conversation. But yeah, if you need that kind of external accountability, I recommend that. And most importantly, organization. If you're doing an online project, you need a place to collate all of the information you're generating. In our case, we use Notion. It's really nice. There's also Asana for general project management. yeah, so pick one and live by it. I recommend it. So those are the tools. Now, I want to pass on to Jenna, and we're going to do a little group activity, a little bit of interactivity.